You're watching Beyond Markets. Welcome, I'm Kenneth Igbomor, and on today's show, we'll discuss sustainable development and debt sustainability as the IMF brings the focus to Africa. Later on, we'll find out how Dubai is turning the desert into a mini city, and from the Dubai Air Show, we'll get some insight on the opportunities in the drone industry ahead of the Dubai Expo 2020. You can join the conversation by sending tweets to our hashtag, that's at Beyond Market. You can also tweet at me at Kenneth Igbomor. Now, Nigeria's Finance Minister, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, says it is very important for African countries to balance the need between development and debt sustainability. She also stressed that Nigeria is not anywhere near debt distress levels when asked about the government's recent borrowing plans. I caught up with her in Dakar at the IMF's International Conference on Sustainable Development and Debt Sustainability to discuss this and more.
It's very important for our countries to balance the need between development as well as debt sustainability. On the one hand, we have a very huge development deficit. On the other hand, we don't have sufficient revenue to meet those deficits. So it means necessarily we must borrow. But when we borrow, we must make sure that our borrowing is responsible and that we're borrowing to build out infrastructure that will produce future returns. So in Nigeria, we keep a very close eye on debt sustainability analysis. We have put a lot of emphasis on being transparent in our borrowing. We have a debt management office that is set up by law on a quarterly basis. We publish on the website and also meet with the press to say, this is our current debt level. This is what we have borrowed this quarter. This is what we have serviced. Currently, Nigeria's debt is at 25 trillion naira. That is about 83 billion US dollars. And at 83 billion US dollars, we're just at 18.99%, so 19% debt to GDP. I hear people say Nigeria has a debt problem. We don't have a debt problem. What we have is a revenue challenge. And the whole of this government is currently working on how to enhance our revenues, to ensure that we meet our obligations to service government as well as to service debt.
Yeah, I hear you when you say that, but when you look at how the budget is structured, we're still have structural challenges with how the budget is structured in trying to get more spend on the capital expenditure side of things and less on the recurrent, but also, we still run a deficit budget. In looking at this and how that is going, I'd like you to speak to the debt burden for Nigeria. You mentioned earlier 25.7 trillion, but I'd like you to speak on how we are trying to make it more sustainable going forward.
Well, in trying to make it more sustainable is in making sure that we conduct regular debt sustainability analysis. So for every debt we're going to add, we will have incorporated it into the national debt. We'll have looked at what is going to be the impact on debt service and also the total debt stock. So this is whether the debt is a federal government debt or a subnational debt or a debt from one of some of the large government-owned enterprises. Fact is, we cannot develop effectively by just developing with revenue. So even in a business, you have to have a certain leverage to be able to grow fast. While we borrow, we must make sure that the borrowing is for capital projects that are important for enhancing the business environment in the country. We will not be borrowing to pay salaries or recurrent expenditure. We borrow for capital expenditure and critical human capital development.
All right, but looking at the elephant in the room, talking about borrowing, we understand that the government is tabling a new $27.9 billion, about $29 billion to the National Assembly to get more to carry out some projects. I'm trying to understand that, like you mentioned, the debt burden just now. Isn't that going to add some stress to those checks that we do periodically on our debt if we're near debt distress levels?
You see, but we are not anywhere near debt distress levels. Let me just say that again. At 19% of GDP, for the size of our economy, what the World Bank and IMF advise for the size of Nigeria's economy is a borrowing level of up to 55%. We're at 19%. But
then the debt service is also an issue. So
the debt service is what is an issue. And what we need to do is not only to reduce debt, but to increase revenue so that the debt service becomes easier and also management of government becomes easier. We simply are underperforming in revenue, and that is something that is within our control to do.
I understand a lot of work is being done on that bit with the finance bill coming on board.
Yes, we have the finance bill. The finance bill has made provisions to reduce taxes for small and medium enterprises. And in fact, for very small businesses, we're eliminating taxes altogether. We believe by doing so, we will encourage the 60% informal sector to actually be formalized. It will enable the businesses to be financially inclusive and for the businesses to grow and subsequently be able to pay taxes.
All right, but let's look at Nigeria and our development target, and how far are we from meeting the Sustainable Development Goals?
Well, we have made very good progress in the sense that we clearly see increasing investments in education as well as in health. With the passage of the law on a Universal Basic Health Care Provision Fund, where annually now 1% of the health of the national budget is packed for the basic health care provision, that is for addressing the healthcare needs of the primary healthcare centers of the country. And in the 2020 budget, we are enhancing that by making it a statutory transfer, which means on autopilot, that amount will be fully funded. Every month we release those funding. We believe that when you invest in education and you have healthy people, they will be able to acquire better quality education, and there's a large ripple effect. So every dollar that you invest in health has been proven by research that you get at least $15 return. So for us, investment is in human capital is also investing in the economy.
Okay, looking at how Africa is going, we understand how when you look at developments so far on the continent, we're seeing the African Continental Free Trade Agreement coming on board. We're also seeing, progress in terms of the African Investment Forum, where, countries are coming together, development finance institutions are coming together to look for creative way of funding, development on the continent because of how important this is right now. I'd like you to speak to that point on getting that cohesion, the concerted efforts we're seeing, and how would Nigeria like to play more in that space?
Well, cooperation is very important because it's becoming clear that Africa is going to be one market. We are not going to continue to be 57 countries. We will become one market. And to be able to do this effectively, we have to cooperate with each other. We have to make sure that we put in place protocols and guidelines, and that everybody commits to obeying those protocols and guidelines so that no one economy is hurt because of the integration. We see the benefits of that market, and for us in Nigeria, we have to support our local industry so that they can grow and become competitive. Otherwise, we will lose out in the benefits that we see coming from joining the AFCFTA.
I understand that the recent engagement had with other countries, neighboring countries in Nigeria on, working out modalities for the closed borders and how things will work going forward. What has been that feedback? Well,
the discussions are quite positive. Everybody understands that Nigeria and our neighbors each need to respect the common protocols that we committed to. So when we become one market, it means goods can come through any of the countries and be transshipped to any of the countries. And there's a transshipment regulation that says that if a port arrives in the port of one of our neighboring countries, that the customs of that country should bring that container escorted, sealed, for it to be opened, assessed, and dutied at the Nigerian port. That has not been happening. So these containers are opened. A lot of times the goods are repackaged and they are sent to Nigeria as if they're produced in those countries. One of the things that is allowed is that items produced in Nigeria can be exported to our neighboring countries and vice versa. But where the items are not produced in those countries, they're brought from Asia or some other countries and repackaged as if they're produced there. It's hurting our own economy. So we're saying this has gone long enough. With the AFCFTA, the potential of this is doubled and expanded, that we must come back to the table and everybody must commit to obeying the protocols. That's just what we are trying to achieve. We have had ministers, meeting of ministers, and everybody has made a commitment that that is going to happen. We created a technical team of the customs of the two countries, including security and immigration, to set out how this would practically work, like in real terms. So they go out together, they do inspections together, and then they study the flow of traffic of goods as well as people, and then the implementation will be clear who has what responsibility. The border closure is temporary. We're not doing this as something that is pleasing to us, but we realize that if we don't do this now and we wait for the AFCFTA to take full effect, that our country is going to suffer even more than it is suffering now.
All right, finally, we're here still engaging on sustainable development and debt sustainability, but I'd like you to give me your very takeaway. We had the engagement with President earlier today, fascinating conversation, but what has been that key message and that lesson that you're leaving here with for Nigeria?
Well, that all of our countries must enhance domestic revenue mobilization, that we cannot continue to depend on official development assistance. And while borrowing is important, borrowing should be done responsibly and in a manner that is sustainable. And that borrowing should be done just for developmental projects, not for consumption. And that when we borrow, we must also track and make sure that we're getting full value for money as well as better impact for our citizens.